Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with the man, myth, the legend, Mr. Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. One of the topics I'm asking all of my experts this week is about the Federal Reserve, right? Jerome Powell actually spoke this morning and kind of reiterated his message. We're going higher. We're going to stay there longer. We won't repeat the mistakes of the 70s with kind of the stop and go policies. So I just wanted to ask you, as I have asked others, do you think the Fed is aiming for a recession? Do you think that's what they're kind of saying? Hey, we need a recession to cool these things off, or what do you think's going on in the Fed's mind?
No, I don't think that they're trying to cause a recession. I think they recognize that what they're doing may lead to a recession, but I think they're trying to thread the needle. And I think, probably those comments of Jerome Powell's, maybe they're leaning in the direction of, hey, if the Fed had done this in the 70s, we wouldn't have had that recession in 81 that was caused by having to hike interest rates to 20%, right? So we're going to, come in hard and fast now, make a statement, and get this thing under control while it's still, before it gets really out of hand, unlike, in the 70s, what the central bank let happen then. So I think that's what they're trying to do. Now, whether they'll succeed or not is a whole different question. And I
Correct.
think, and listen, I don't know. I know there's a lot of people out there, and I think you're one of them, are saying we're definitely heading for a recession because of what the Fed is doing. I am not so sure. And the reason that I'm not so sure about that is there is a couple things. Money is still cheap, right? It's only that money is not cheap compared to how cheap it was before. And I'm not sure that taking like unbelievably cheap money and making it merely extraordinarily cheap is enough to cause a recession,
Sure.
right? I mean, you have to have the whole economy basically dependent on that super cheap money and having all their future expectations based on super cheap money for that to happen. Now maybe that happened. I don't know. But I'm not sure if like 2 years of the unbelievably extraordinarily cheap money was enough to kind of set everybody's expectations going forward that this is how it was going to be forever, such that, hiking a couple of points and getting it back to just merely cheap is enough to kill things. And I think that's probably what the Fed is thinking, that, hey,
Yeah.
if we, it's not like they're raising interest rates to like, 7-8% for the federal funds rate, right? And you're not talking about 10%, mortgages and 15% corporate debt. That's not where we're at now. But who knows? I mean, look, if this doesn't work and the Fed has to keep on raising rates and we get there, then that would definitely lead to a recession. But I because it would just, nobody could afford to borrow corporations couldn't afford to borrow at that rates. And until housing prices came down substantially, people would not be able to afford to borrow at those rates either. But I don't, at least for the time being, I don't think that we're heading there.
I think that is very well said. I do not believe the Fed purposely wants to create a recession. I think they would like to thread the needle. I think the area they have to successfully have a soft landing is also smaller than they would like, but it's not zero. As for what I think, just to kind of round that out, I actually think we're going into the third global recession of the last 70 odd years. So I think the US will be the last kind of major area into the recession. It also might be the first out, kind of last in, last out, nice place to be. But I think Asia, I think Europe is there. I think China is there, but the numbers are dirty. So Asia's going there. We're seeing shipping rates and all that. I think 2023 is going to be bad. As for the US, I think what pulls us into a recession, because again, the job market's strong, right? We used to talk about the unemployment claims every day or every week, you and I.
Yeah.
Today they came out at 222, down 6,000 from last week. So this wave of layoffs everybody is clamoring for aren't currently happening. So the job market is strong. And I think the Fed's going higher. I think what pulls the U.S. into a recession is the housing market. I think the 30-year rate goes to 7%. We hit 6.25% yesterday. Cycle peak was 6.28 in June. More is coming, right? We got a 75 basis point hike coming the 21st, I suspect, and then 50 and then 25. We end the year at 3.75 to 4% Fed funds. I think the mortgage rate's 7%. Now, I don't see this epic housing price decline, but I do see an epic transaction decline. I think we could be sub 4 million annualized. And then again, that's coming from 7 million. So I think housing has led us into more recessions than not. So I think the housing market crash in transactions, which is 15% of GDP, gets cut in a third, which naturally pulls us negative and hence our recession in 2023. So that's what I think as far as what's going on in the economy. But I got to ask, Jonathan, you undoubtedly heard the Fed say, and Jerome Powell specifically say, pain is coming. If it's not a recession, what do you think he meant by pain is coming?
Yeah, well, I think anytime you raise interest rates, it's going to be painful for people, right? It's going to cost more money to do certain things, right? It's going to cost more money to buy a house. It's going to cost more money to refinance your debt. It's going to cost more money to, for corporations, right? So all those things are certainly painful. I don't think that necessarily means that pain equals a recession, right? So, but yeah, I think he's being upfront and saying, look, it's going to hurt. But it's like everything else. It's like, well, inflation hurts too, right? That's raising your costs in a different way. So, but that's not causing a recession, right? I mean, in fact, it's sort of the other way around. The economy is so smoking hot that you've got inflation, right? That's sort of, at least historically, that's the case, right? So, but it's painful, right? So I think that's what that's how I interpret those statements. Right. I did want to point out one thing to you, though. I don't know if you saw this. It just popped up right before we got on the call that the ECB just did a major
75. They've gone from, so they were negative since 2014. They went to zero last time, and now they're at 0.75. Canada did another big raise yesterday at up 75 after doing a full 1 basis point. So we have half the central banks, all the major ones, raising rates at this point. Yeah.
But they're still extremely cheap, right?
So, agreed.
Yeah, they're still extremely cheap, and they're still not normalized interest rates. And I think that if they're, I don't think any of those central banks either are trying to put their economies into recession, but they're definitely trying to cool things off, right? I mean, well,
they have an added issue of currency, right?
Yeah.
You've seen what's going on with the euro and the Japanese yen, and it's just the strong dollar is just crushing. And again, if you have debt denominated in dollars, oh my, emerging market, it next year is going to have a lot of kind of surprises, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad for them, obviously, buying U.S. stuff or servicing debt that are in dollars. On the other hand, I mean, their tourism industries are just crushing it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like with dollars, so with local currencies so cheap, they're loving the tourism boost that they're getting for sure, and the goods purchasing boost that they're getting, but those things also fuel inflation locally, right? When you've got all these Americans flooding in, spending all this money, pumping money into the economy, goods that are cheap for Americans being purchased. It's so they've got to cool that off too. So I think, and they don't want the currency imbalance has really grown.
There's
right.
Yeah, it will be a problem. I mean, we've already seen Sri Lanka, obviously months ago. There's more Sri Lankas out there that I think will, that we'll have to deal with going forward. So back to the pain is coming. How about asset prices? Do you think the Fed wants to see people's 401ks in the stock market? Obviously, the Dow fell 1,000 points that Friday. They weren't ready for it. Do you think the Federal Reserve kind of looks at the stock market and crypto and maybe even housing and goes, too much, too high, bubble, we've got to pop it?
Well, again, I don't think that they have any intention of hurting people's savings, right? Sure. That's not the intention. But again, I would just, it's kind of like the same answer. I think that they probably, they're like trying to thread the needle. I think, just like you said, I mean, most people that I'm reading are not, I mean, there are a few outliers, but most people that I'm following are not calling for outright price declines in housing, right? They're calling for, a slowdown in transactions, because all the other problems with the housing market are still there. Too little supply, people can't move. All those things still persist, even if interest rates are higher.
Agreed.
So I think you're not going to see like a major decline in home values. The stock market, is very sensitive to interest rates. So obviously you see a lot of volatility there because of what's going on. But I think probably the Fed's view is that, well, yeah, there's going to be some pain now. And that's probably one of the things they're talking about pain wise, right?
Yes.
Yeah, your stock portfolio is going to take a hit, but we all know what's going to happen. A new equilibrium will be established around the new rates, and then Wall Street will go back to doing its thing. And if companies are earning money, their stock price will go up, right?
Agreed.
So
yeah.
I think it is all, it's tough if you're like planning on retiring next year. There's certainly pain there, but I don't certainly don't think that they're trying to do this. I mean, who knows? Maybe they could be trying to kill crypto, and I'd be with them if they did that. But I don't think that's. I don't think that they're trying to stop an asset bubble per se.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So then the last one to talk about, we'll wrap up episode 1, and this is the unemployment rate. I'll just come out and tell you that I think of all things we've talked about, this is the one they're looking at going, that needs to go up. All right. We can't keep having, what was 3.5 now is 3.7, because that again just leads to their wage inflation, which they're pretty concerned about. So of everything we've talked about, I think the only one that they're looking at going, that's that. And I think that's what they really mean by pain is coming, right? You go from 3.7 to 5%. That's probably millions of people unemployed.
Right.
So I think that's the one that they're like, that's that number right there. That's got to go up. What do you think?
I mean, I wonder, because we've had sub 5 unemployment for a very long time now, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's been quite some time. So you can ask yourself, is that the problem, right? The problem, quote unquote, that, the unemployment's too low, so there's too much pressure on wages. Yep. But here's the thing though, there wasn't this pressure on wages 3-4 years ago, like before COVID, when unemployment was also at 3.7 or whatever it is now, right? You didn't see the same pressure on wages. And it's very interesting to kind of figure out why suddenly there is this pressure on wages. It's like collectively every American woke up and they're like, damn it, I'm not really thrilled with my job. You got to pay me more, like, because they were home for all this time, right? I mean, and they all did it at the same time. So the collective effect of it is pretty dramatic. Will rising interest rates affect that? I'm not really sure, because all you hear about now is people saying, I can't hire anybody. There's nobody to hire, right? I can't find qualified workers. And will interest rates make that?
Well, yeah,
that?
I mean,
people,
Milton Friedman in the 70s, as you undoubtedly have looked at and studied Milton Friedman from the 70s. If you don't know who he is, he's probably the most well-known economist. He keeps reminding us that as the Fed raises rates, it could take up to 12 to 18 months to feel the impacts, right? There's this big, huge delay or lag. And I actually think the worst part of inflation is coming, and it's not headline, it's core, right? We have seen headline come in, I think, 2 months in a row. Core hasn't budged. I think wage inflation is going to go up, not down. And obviously, as you and I both know, rent has been underreported, and it's going to eventually smack core. So I think the Fed's going to increasingly worry about core inflation. What do you think?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess nothing to say about
that's fine.
Why,
yeah. Sometimes they take right turns. I'm sorry. That's okay. Well, you know what? Tell people about your amazing Facebook group, and we'll get into episode number 2, which people have to check out. It's basically how to do what you do and how some people do it incorrectly. So where can people find you?
Yeah. So, please come along, join my Facebook group. It's called the Multifamily Investment Community on Facebook. There are some questions that I would like you to answer when you try to join the group, which are essentially that you're not going to spam the group. But please come and join the conversation over there. Would love to see you.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely.